few verses of Ezra. So we're looking today at the context of what we will be looking at over the coming days in the will of the Lord. We'll look at the background, we'll look at the historical background to this book of Ezra, and then we'll look at the books, not only Ezra, but the books that it's associated with, again just in their context, and then we'll think briefly of some of the benefits that there are for us in studying this book. First of all then, the background. Now I acknowledge there will be quite a number of dates that I mentioned here. I don't remember the most of them off by heart, and just by looking them up and that sort of thing. Also, dates are approximate. We have to acknowledge that. The dates that are given here are not exactly known. Depends on different dating systems and all that sort of thing. So the dates are only approximate. So for example, if I mention something about 458 BC and you say, well, Newbury says 457 BC, doesn't mean that one's right and the other's wrong. It's just a year or two of difference between them, and it's only approximate as we look at it. We know, of course, of that sad division that took place in the United Kingdom of Israel, the 12 tribes, and after the death of Solomon, how it split into, the clock seems to be just taking off there. I have to watch this one. On the back has just decided to go nearly 4 o'clock already, so better not watch it. If you find it, I've forgotten it, I just do this and I'll be reminded to look at the clock. Yes, the division that took place into the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel and the 2 tribes, the southern of Judah, and the departure that was really complete and total there in Israel from God in Judah. Of course, it was departure as well, but it wasn't just as total, it wasn't as sudden. There were those good kings that we know of who stemmed the tide of corruption and evil for a while. So that the great world power of Assyria, that it took the northern kingdom of Israel away captive, there about 722 BC. Judah, it was held off for a while, and by the time their turn came, no longer was Assyria the great empire of the world. Babylon had taken over as the world empire and taken over the Assyrian kingdom, and so it was Babylon that led away the southern kingdom of Judah. But that took place in 3 different stages. I mention that because it's significant when we come to the recovery. There was an invasion in 605 BC, or thereabouts, by Nebuchadnezzar. He started deporting people away from Jerusalem, started making it difficult for the kings and so on. After that one, there was a second one in 597 BC. He was carrying away the fighting men, carrying away the craftsmen. Things were getting more disordered, more chaos, more difficulty among the kings. The end of 2nd Chronicles, we read about all of that. But then really the final thing as it was in 586 BC, when he just came in with full force and destroyed the temple, carried off all the vessels and the furnishings, and destroyed the city, destroyed the defences, and took away the great majority of the population, and only left behind mainly poor people there in the vicinity of Jerusalem. Now, the thing about this is that one of the many things about it is that God foretold that it would happen. He told through Jeremiah, for example, in chapter 25, and in chapter 29, he told that this captivity would take place. Not only so, but he told how long it would be. Jeremiah said in chapter 25 and in chapter 29 that it would be for 70 years. Not only so, but he told through Jeremiah that it wouldn't last forever and that they would return after those 70 years. That's there very plainly in Jeremiah and chapter 29. And not only that, but through Isaiah in chapter 44 and chapter 45, he told the very name of the king Cyrus who would bring it about. And that was probably about 150 years before Cyrus was born. Maybe about 200 years before Cyrus actually issued the decree that we've read about, the Lord through the prophet Isaiah, said that Cyrus would be the one he would raise up to do it. And that's a very wonderful thing just to think about, that God was not, we know this, but it gives us assurance and gives us such comfort. God is not taken by surprise by anything. And God in His Word, one of the surest things that makes us know that God is true and His Word is true, is the great prophecies that were given years before they took place. That they would be taken, that it would be for 70 years, but that they would return again, and the very name of the man who would be instrumental in the hand of God doing that. Now, at the beginning of the book of Ezra, that time has come. The time that God said would come, when they would return back to the city of Jerusalem again. So you can see, and that's why I read both at the end of 2nd Chronicles and the beginning of Ezra, it's really the same thing has been said, that at the end of the book, when the kings have been taken away and the people taken away, and it all seems so sad and so tragic, well, you have this great promise at the end of it. The writers think, well, it didn't finish there, but it was all over. This is what Cyrus decreed. And then the beginning of Ezra, now here's the details, not only of what he decreed, but of how it came about. And now it's no longer the Babylonian Empire, because the world empires were changing. Assyria gave place to Babylon, but now the Babylonian Empire itself had been taken over by the Persian Empire. And so it's the Persian king Cyrus. He is the king of Persia, but he's also the king of Babylon, because he's taken over Babylon, and he's actually the king of Assyria. If we get to the end of chapter 6 by Wednesday night, in the will of the Lord, we'll see that, because he's taken over these different kingdoms. And of course his kingdom didn't last either. After that came the Greek Empire and Alexander the Great and so on, and his didn't last. Then came the Roman Empire and so on. But now it's the Persian king Cyrus who has come not only to the throne of his own empire, but taken over the Babylonian Empire, and he is instrumental in this return. And the interesting thing is that just as the departure from Jerusalem was in 3 stages, so the return took place in 3 stages as well. The first, in about 536 BC. We know that roughly because Cyrus took over Babylon in about 539 or 538 BC, and that's when he would have made this edict. Within a year of that, at about 536, 537 BC, at the command of Cyrus that we read about this morning, this man that we'll soon see appearing the scene, Zerubbabel, he led the first return back to Jerusalem. And that main work that they did was the rebuilding of the temple. And then the second return, it took place about 458 BC. And now it's a different king is on the throne. It's no longer Cyrus, it's Artaxerxes. And the leader of the group back this time, it's not Zerubbabel, but Ezra. And his work is not so much now the rebuilding of the temple, but it's reforming the people. The people there, they needed reformation, and that was what really was involved in the second return. And then the third return, about 444 BC. Again, it's King Artaxerxes, but it's not now Zerubbabel that's leading the return. It's not Ezra that's leading it, but it's Nehemiah with Ezra. Ezra was with him as he led that third return. And the emphasis is not now so much on building the temple, but it's building the walls of the city. That was the main work, as well again as reforming of the people that took place there. And that's enough about the background, the historical background to what we have here. Where does this book of Ezra and the other books associated with it fit in to that? Well, there's really 6 books of the Old Testament that are particularly relevant as far as this period in their history is concerned. 3 historical and 3 prophetical. In fact, the last 3 historical books and the last 3 prophetical books. The last 3 historical books are Ezra and Nehemiah and Esther. Ezra chapters 1 to 6. That's all about that first return. The return that took place in 536 BC at Cyrus' command under Zerubbabel. The second return, that's the subject of the second part of the book of Ezra. Ezra chapters 7 to 10 is concerned with the second return, the one that took place under Ezra, under King Artaxerxes, about 458 BC. And then the book of Esther, it takes place in between those two, because between the end of chapter 6 and the beginning of chapter 7, there's a period of about 57, 58 years, and the book of Esther, the events of that took in place there in the reign of King Ahasuerus, who was between Cyrus, who's in the first part of Ezra, and Artaxerxes, who's in the second half of the book of Ezra. So really, the book of Ezra and the book of Nehemiah, as we'll see in a moment, is concerned with those who return to Jerusalem, whereas the book of Esther is concerned with those who remain behind and how they fared there. But in Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, it's concerned with the third return, the one that took place under Nehemiah in 444 BC. So that it just sets the historical books in their context. The first return, Ezra chapters 1 to 6. The second return, Ezra chapters 7 to 10. The third return, the book of Nehemiah and the book of Esther, comes in between the first and the second return, in that interval of a number of years that were there. The three prophetic books, the last three prophetic books in the Old Testament, Haggai, Zechariah and Malachi, the first two of those, they fit in here in what we'll be looking at over these days, Lord willing. In fact, before we get too far, we'll read about Haggai and Zechariah prophesying. But plenty to keep us busy in these chapters, but there are things that they write in their prophecies that are very relevant and give an insight into what the situation was here. So Haggai and Zechariah, although they're really later on in the Bible, placed there at the end of the prophets, historically they actually belong here. And then the book of Malachi, in as far as we know, although we can't say dogmatically, it probably was associated with the book of Nehemiah. It was at that period later on, that's much later than what we will be looking at. So we see the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, they are very closely related to one another. In fact, they were placed together for a time in the Hebrew Bible, and they're both concerned with returning to Jerusalem and the renewal and reformation of the people. And this man Ezra, he appears in both. He appears in the book of Ezra and he appears in the book of Nehemiah. Ironically, he doesn't appear at all in what we will be looking at over these days. He wasn't there in chapters 1 to 6. He writes that from his records, as we'll see in a moment. So this man Ezra, the author of this book, interesting, his name means helper, and he certainly was that, a big helper in the work of the Lord, and he's prominent there in chapters 7 to 10. Now, it could be asked, well, how do we know that he is the author of this book? Well, we don't know it in the sense that it doesn't say, I, Ezra, write this book, but there's very strong evidence that would indicate that he was the author of it. In a part of the book that we won't be looking at, he writes in the first person. He says, I and me, and so on. So the fact that he's using his own personal name there, for about chapter 7, verse 25 through down into partway through chapter 9, he refers to himself obviously as somebody who was there and somebody who was in a position of responsibility, one who had responsibility for what took place. And he tells us at the beginning of chapter 7 that the one who was responsible was Ezra. So it's not stretching things to see that Ezra is speaking of himself when he writes I and so on in those chapters of the book. Now in chapter 7, maybe we should just turn to it for a moment or two to look at one or two things there. In Ezra chapter 7, he refers to himself in a couple of ways. You notice he says in chapter 7 verse 5 that he gives his genealogy, and he says at the end of it there, the son of Aaron, the chief priest. So we see that he was of the priestly family, and that's confirmed in verse 21. Ezra the priest So he was a priest. So again, it's no stretch of the imagination to see here's a man who would have been intensely interested in the events that took place many years before that he records in chapters 1 to 6, because it's all about the temple, about the altar, about the feasts, the sacrifices, and if anybody's going to be interested in that, well, certainly a priest will be. So he's writing about events that were historical for him, but about which he would have been very interested and had a very good knowledge. Now, not only so, but chapter 7, verse 6, this Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was already scribe in the law of Moses. And what did the scribes do? Well, their work was copying out the scriptures and other records as well. So here is one who not only is a priest, but as a scribe would have had records, historical records to hand, one likely who was involved in the copying out of historical records, and again would have had a great interest in them. So this book, I don't have any doubt whatsoever that it's written by Ezra. The second part of the book, chapters 7 to 10, he's writing from personal experience. He was there and he was involved. Chapters 1 to 6, he has impeccable sources for it. He would have had access to and an interest in the records of what took place there in connection with going to Jerusalem. And as we'll see again before we get to the end, in fact we read it today there, Cyrus, the proclamation he made, he also caused it to be put in writing. So it was all written down, and Ezra, he's using historical records as well, of course, as what God would have revealed to him, as he did to any of the writers of Scripture as he came to write this book. Now, as I've indicated, this book is very easy to divide into two. There are those two very definite time periods there. Chapters 1 to 6 is Cyrus's edict about the return to Jerusalem, and it takes us right to the completion of the temple there at the end of chapter 6. A period altogether of about 20 years, from roughly 536 BC to 516 BC. The building wasn't going on the whole of that time, as we'll see. For a good bit of that time the building was stopped. We'll not go into the details of that now, but the whole period, chapters 1 to 6, it takes about 20 years. And then chapters 7 to 10, it's the events when Ezra comes back from Babylon. And again, as far as we know, that's a relatively short period, likely only a period of about 1 year. And in between those two, there is a gap of about 57 or 58 years between the building of the temple, the completion of the temple, and then the return under Ezra all those years later. Now, there is a different emphasis in the two parts of the book. We won't get time really to go into detail of this. I'll just mention it. Right near the beginning of the first part of the book, you read this phrase about building the house of the Lord. It's there in chapter 1 and verse 3. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord. So we can really write over chapters 1 to 6, building the house of the Lord. And then when you get to chapter 7 and verse 27, we have there about to beautify the house of the Lord. So chapter 7 to 10 is about beautifying the house of the Lord. See, it was good and very vital that they had the material building made, but it wasn't just enough for the building to be made. The people who were there needed to be in a proper spiritual state. And as we see in chapter 7 to 10, there were things that weren't in a good spiritual state, and those things had to be put right. So the temple had to be there. Yeah, that was vitally important, but those who were going to be operating in connection with it, the people of God, needed to be right spiritually before the Lord. And how big a lesson that is for us today, that the house of God, as we know, is the assembly of the living God, and that's absolutely essential and absolutely important that we would be in the assembly, but it's not enough. We need to be in the right spiritual state before the Lord, and that is something that we need to always keep in mind, and that God's word is given for us not only to take us to the right place, but that we would be in the right spiritual state to enjoy it and to be pleasing to the Lord in association with it. Now the two parts, I just mentioned this and I can't develop this at all, the two parts do stand in parallel to each other, and I hope all of us, myself included, that even though we're only going to go to chapter 6, that we'll continue to read on in the book personally, and we'll see that there are parallels between the two parts. In both parts there's a decree from a monarch to return back to Jerusalem. There's a list of those who do go back. There's ceremony that takes place when they get back. There's opposition that they face. There's resolution of the conflicts and crises that take place. There's a challenge to the hearts of the people from the Lord, and there are good results that come from that. So we're looking at this book, written probably about 450 BC. It had to be between the end, obviously, of the events at chapter 10 and before Nehemiah went back again. So roughly maybe about 450 BC. But we don't need to worry about that too much. Now, just very briefly for a couple of minutes, we'll think about some of the benefits that there would be, and I trust that we will have from reading this book together. In many ways, you know, it parallels the situation that we are in today, because it's a very long time after the beginning of the nation. If you take the beginning of the nation as a national people, to be the coming out from Egypt under Moses, it was a very long time ago as far as these people were concerned. And those early dramatic events that took place at the time of the Exodus, there's nothing really to compare with that. They're not seeing rivers or seas opening up. They're not seeing bread coming down miraculously from heaven and all that sort of thing. Things are really, if you put it, quite quiet. And not all the excitement and drama taking place that would have been the case for the people coming out of Egypt. When they came out of Egypt, the whole crowd of them came out. There was nobody was left behind. Whereas here in Babylon, there's only really a minority who come out. And it's really relatively late as far as Old Testament history is concerned. We're thinking about 400, 500 BC. And as we know, for 400 years until the Lord came, there was no prophetic voice at all. So we're really looking at very near the end of recorded history there in the Old Testament. Difficult circumstances, weakness, opposition, all those things, much to discourage. And in many ways, isn't it like that for us? We're a long time from the start of things as far as the New Testament is concerned. The events that took place in the Acts, those miraculous things, they're not taking place today. The number of people who were getting saved at that time, that number of people aren't getting saved today. We do believe that we're very near the end of this dispensation, just as these people were, and there's plenty of opposition, there's plenty to discourage, plenty of things that could make us feel, well, we're weak numerically and we're weak spiritually. All those things are true, but we learn here that God is faithful and God is the same. And these people learn that lesson, and it's an important lesson for us as well. The character of God, His righteous character, it comes through very clearly. His compassion and His care for people, that comes through as well. God's promises, we see from this book, His promises are fulfilled. His promises are kept. He doesn't change His promises. He will fulfill them for these people. They find that, and we are encouraged that God, He will fulfill His promises to us as well as we look to Him. There's much in this book about how God works behind the scenes to accomplish His purpose. And I think that's a big encouragement to us as well. That we may not see much externally, but God is working behind the scenes. He's certainly doing that here, despite the difficulties, despite it not being a dramatic time in the history of the nation, despite the failure of His people. God is faithful, and He is working behind the scenes for His own glory and for the benefit of people. He provides what His people need. He provides it here, and He provides it for us as well, and He will do so. So much in this book to encourage His people then in devotion to God, in worship of God, in praise of God, in faithfulness to God and to His Word, separation from sin, holiness of life, all those things depending on Him, they're all there. And they're all things that we need to be reminded of and encouraged in today. To praise and worship and give thanks to God for His great goodness. To be faithful in work and service for Him, despite the difficulties all around, that it is so worthwhile. That we would be encouraged to separate from sin and separate from worldliness and all those things that are contrary to God and to His Word, and that we would live in dependence, two words, on Him from day to day. So we do trust that as we look at these things, that God will help us, that we will be encouraged in these difficult days to live for Him as well. I'm glad of the opportunity to be able just to set the scene for this. We have the 3 nights here, and you might think, well, 6 chapters and 3 nights is going to be a bit of a gallop. Well, in a way, yes, but it's not that we'll be looking at every verse in detail and trying to dot every I and cross every T. For example, chapter 2, there's a lot of names there, and we will not look at an awful lot of detail in that, but we trust that over the 3 nights the Lord will give us help, that we will get spiritual lessons from these things that are a help to us in this day in which we live.